Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting edition of Edpuzzle Lecture Notes, just like a regular lecture, just on your computer. All right, so now we're going to have our first lecture on the muscular system. So I think most of you guys know what muscles are. You kind of know how they work and why you need muscles and how it goes with the skeletal system to enable you to lift objects or move. But anyways, as you can see here, not a lot on this slide, about 40 to 50% of the mass of your body is made up of muscles. So about half your weight is just how much muscle you have in your body. And so about half your weight is due just to muscles. Myology, that is the study of muscles. We're going to learn how they contract, which means they get shorter. And as this contraction is going to turn the chemical energy that is stored in muscles. So your neurons are going to transmit a signal to the muscle, and that muscle is going to turn the chemical energy into actual mechanical energy or movement. And we'll see how that goes in our next lecture. All right, so now three broad categories or classes of muscles that you're going to need to know. The first type is the one you're most familiar with. I think you'll be familiar with most of these, but skeletal muscles. So these are the ones that are under voluntary control. So if you're taking notes right now and you're writing with your pencil, that is, you're using skeletal muscles. Now, skeletal muscles are they're called striated, which means they have little stripes. And if you can look at this individual unit right here, it's called a sarcomere. You can see there's little stripes in it. Probably you shouldn't be using red, but anyways, you can see there's little stripes. It's striated. And later on in our next lecture, you'll learn that the reason that they have stripes is because there's thick fibers and there's thin fibers, myosin and actin, and that's what gives it its stripes. But you'll see that later. So these are the type of muscles which are attached to your skeleton. That's why they're called skeletal muscles. They're multinucleated. That just means that each one of these cells, these muscle cells, have more than one nucleus inside the cell, not just one. So it's got many. So that's basically what you're going to need to know about skeletal muscles. Know that they are voluntary. You're the one that decides whether to contract it or relax it. It's totally under your control. And the next one is cardiac muscles. So basically, you probably know what that means. These are the muscles that are in your heart. They're also striated. You can't see the stripes as much, but there are stripes. They are striated muscle. These are single nucleus, so each muscle tissue or each muscle cell has only one nucleus. And probably most important, other than these are the muscles that make up the muscles in your heart, these are involuntary. So every second or two, you do not have to think about having your heart to beat. It's going to do it all by itself. Now, obviously, you can speed it up and slow it down by doing various exercises or breathing techniques, but for the most part, heart beats all by itself, totally involuntary. It doesn't take conscious thought to do it. And the last type is called smooth muscle. This is probably the one you're probably the least familiar with. Now, smooth muscle is also a single nucleus, one nucleus per cell. It's got no striation. So in smooth muscle, there's no stripes in these muscle cells like you see in the cardiac or the skeletal muscle. These muscles, all like cardiac muscles, are also involuntary. So these things, they do their job outside of your conscious thought. And these are mostly what line like your GI tract, like inside your stomach, inside your intestines, the muscles in your eyes and the uterus in females, blood vessels. Those muscles can contract or expand, which influences blood pressure. Your stomach, the muscles churns the food to turn into chyme, which we'll learn in digestive system. So these are muscles that are not under your voluntary control, and these are just usually the muscles that are inside your internal organs. And a little diagram of a skeletal muscle cell right here. You can see multinucleated. So these little purple ovals, those are the nuclei, so it's got more than one nucleus. You can see the striations or the stripes, which are caused by the thick bands and the thin bands, the myosin and the actin. And under this actual slide right here, you can see the bands right here. So that would be skeletal muscle. It's striated, multinucleated, more than one nucleus per cell. And this is the type of muscles that connect to your skeleton, your bones, and this is what allows for movement. And this is under voluntary control. And just a diagram of cardiac muscle. Remember, this is the muscle that's inside your heart, which allows it to beat. Remember, this one only has a single nucleus per cell. So this is one muscle cell here. This would be a second one down here. And there's only one nucleus per cell. You can see it does have the lines or the stripes. It is striated. Down here in this microscope slide, you can see barely. It's not as easy to see as skeletal muscle, but it is striated or striped. And remember, this is involuntary. This muscle contracts outside of your conscious awareness. It happens all by itself. And not really much to see here, but here's a diagram of a smooth muscle cell. You can see some of them here, but all you need to know, remember, these are the cells that are inside your internal organs, your stomach, small intestine, large intestine. Remember, they have one nucleus per cell, and you cannot see there is no stripes. There's no striations. This is non-striated muscle. All right, so now some functions of the muscular system or functions of muscle tissue. The first two are basically kind of the same thing. Number one, obviously, it produces body movements. So your muscles are attached by tendons to bones, and when that muscle contracts or shortens, it'll make the bones or the limbs in your body actually move. Number two is kind of like the same thing. So not only does it make your body move, it also stabilizes your body positions. So just by standing up, even if you're not actually walking or moving, you still need those muscles to stabilize you and keep you upright, keep you standing up. Number three, they store and move substances within and through the body. So there's these bands of smooth muscles called sphincters. Those are like little valves. So those things will open or close in order to either hold something in the body, or actually when it opens, it'll allow that substance to move through. Like your stomach has what's called the pyloric sphincter, and that's what allows, when it opens, the contents of your stomach are going to leave the stomach and enter the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. It also stores materials. Bladder, of course, stores urine. The stomach is what accepts the food from the esophagus, mixes it with the hydrochloric acid and other enzymes. It churns it to break that food down. Muscles are also used to move things like blood around the body. Remember, first the heart, the cardiac muscles need to pump to get that blood going through the arteries. And remember, the arteries and veins themselves are made of smooth muscles, which can contract, which would raise the blood pressure, or it can expand or relax, which allows more blood to flow through the vessels. And last, one thing that your body needs to maintain homeostasis. So body temperature, humans like body temperature around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or around 37 degrees Celsius. And it's mostly the skeletal muscles that produce heat. So every time a muscle contracts, you need energy, and you get energy in the form of a molecule called ATP. And when the energy is used, ATP becomes a molecule of ADP. And by doing that, it releases a small amount of heat. Also, the contracting muscles, you have different fibers that are sliding against each other. And that friction can also produce heat, which helps keep your body warm. And also, of course, if you're really cold, your muscles will start to involuntarily shiver or shake, and that's to help you produce more heat. Now, a few properties of muscle tissue. Number one, muscle tissue shows excitability, which basically means they will respond to chemicals released from neurons. Remember, that chemical for skeletal muscle is going to be acetylcholine, or ACH. So muscles respond to these chemicals when they're released from nerve cells. Number two is pretty easy, contractibility, which means muscles have the ability to shorten in length. And the opposite of that is extensibility, which means muscles have the ability to stretch or get longer in length. Elasticity, which just means the muscle is able to snap back into its original shape, even if it's been contracted or extended for long periods of time. And the last one is conductivity. which means that muscle cells are able to conduct or transfer informations, electrical signals, from one cell to another. So muscle cells can actually transmit or conduct this electrical signal from cell to cell, kind of like how neurons down their axon could conduct that electrochemical signal. Well, muscles can do the same thing. They kind of act like neurons in that regard. All right, so each skeletal muscle is itself an organ. It's its own organ. Now, these organs are made of thousands and thousands of skeletal muscle cells. And skeletal muscle cells are also called muscle fibers. So a muscle fiber is the same thing as saying a skeletal muscle cell. Now, these muscles and muscle fibers, it's not just made of strictly muscle cells. It's also made a lot of connective tissues. And one type of connective tissue, just a broad term, is called fascia. Fascia is a type of, it's made of dense, irregular connective tissue. I don't believe you'll need to know that. You'll need to know it is a type of connective tissue. That's what CT stands for. And it looks like kind of like a sheet or a band. So it's kind of like a skin or a membrane that surrounds different organs in the body. It allows for free movement of the muscle tissue, the muscle cells. It also carries the nerves, which bring the information which causes the muscles to contract or relax. It contains the blood vessels, which bring nutrients that muscles need. It also gets rid of waste that muscles don't need, like carbon dioxide. And also the lymphatic vessels, lymph, which is in your immune system, those are also carried through the fascia or the connective tissue. All right, so now that we know that muscles are made up of muscle tissue, muscle cells, and also some connective tissue, fascia, well, here's three different types of connective tissue, and this is going to be going from superficial to deep. So this is kind of like the three layers of the serous membranes. Remember the peritoneum or the pericardium? Well, here's three more terms. So the most superficial, this would be closest to the skin, is called the epimysium. Epimysium, there's going to be pictures on the next slide, but this is what surrounds the entire muscle. So it's kind of like a membrane of connective tissue, a skin. It's not cells like skin is, but you can kind of think of it like a skin that surrounds the entire muscle. Now going deeper, now we're going inside that muscle. It's called the perimysium. So that's like the middle layer. So it's deep of the epimysium, and it's going to be superficial of the last one, the endomysium. And this is what's going to surround these bundles or fascicles within the muscles. And these fascicles are just bundles of nerve cells, muscle cells. So you get, anywhere 10, 100, just a bundle of nerve cells that makes up a fascicle. And those nerve cells are enclosed within a sheath called the perimysium. Now, below that, or deep to the perimysium, is the endomysium. Endomysium. And that is like a skin or a sheath of connective tissue that separates each individual muscle cell. It's kind of hard to see what I'm talking about, but on the next slide with a picture, hopefully it'll make it a little bit easier to understand. Now here we have a muscle diagram of the internal anatomy of a muscle itself. So you can see here it is connected to the bone by a tendon. Remember, tendons connect muscle to bone, where ligaments are going to connect bone to bone. And now the different layers of connective tissue. You can see here's the epimysium. So that is what's going to cover the entire muscle itself. So that's going to cover the entire external surface of the muscle. So that's the most superficial, closest to the surface. Next you have the perimysium. Now the perimysium is going to be located deep to the epimysium. So remember, these are the fascicles. So this right here, that's a fascicle, and it is surrounded by the connective tissue called the perimysium. Here's another one. Remember the fascicles? Those are bundles of muscle cells. So each one of these circles inside the larger red circles, those are the individual muscle cells. So these in red, that would be the perimysium, which surrounds the bundles of muscle cells called fascicles. So the perimysium surrounds the fascicles. And now the most deep So now this is going to be each one of these individual muscle cells inside the fascicle. Those are going to be surrounded by connective tissue called the endomysium. So each one of these muscle cells or muscle fibers is surrounded by the connective tissue called the endomysium. All right, so now these connective tissue layers, remember from superficial to deep, epimysium, paramysium, endomysium. Endo always means inside. So all those three layers, they come together past the muscle, and that's what's going to form the tendon to attach that muscle to the bone. So an example of this would be the gastrocnemius, or the calf muscle, which is on the posterior side of the lower part of your leg. It doesn't directly connect to your calcaneus, your heel bone. It is attached to what's called the calcaneal or the Achilles tendon. So that gastrocnemius, the connective tissue layers, form the tendon, the Achilles tendon, which is going to connect the gastrocnemius, your calf muscle, to your heel. Remember, tendons connect muscle to bone, ligaments connect bone to bone. And one more term on this slide, aponeurosis. Aponeurosis. That is a special type of connective tissue. It is a flattened, broad layer. It's kind of like a sheet of tendon. The abdomen is a good example of this, the aponeurosis of the abdomen. It's a very large area that is all just connective tissue, and you're going to see that on the next slide. All right, so on the previous slide, we heard about aponeurosis, a sheet-like band of connective tissue of tendon. You can see it right here. This is the dorsal surface of the hand. So that is just a big sheet of connective tissue, bringing blood vessels, lymph vessels, carrying the neurons, etc. Here you can see, here are the external obliques on this guy. You got the serratus anterior up here, pectoralis major, the main chest muscle, and all those are connected right here to the aponeurosis, all this connective tissue that's going to connect all these muscles. So it's going to connect the external obliques on the right side to the abdominal muscles themselves, and also the external obliques over here on the left side. So that is the aponeurosis, a large, flat layer of connective tissue which binds muscles to muscles and muscles to bones.